Hi, it's Dwyer, gamblersadvisory.com, dwyervip.com. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Now, one of boxing's better websites, Boxing News 24, is reporting that Deontay Wilder, after his next fight, wants to fight Joseph Parker. Both guys are unbeaten. This is assuming Deontay Wilder wins his next fight. Both guys are unbeaten. Both guys hit awfully hard, right? This is just a first impression video. When I read the article, I thought to myself, you know what? I'd give Wilder the edge in that fight. Simply because I believe Wilder knows who he is. He knows his shortcomings, right? He's a guy who understands that his best attribute is that right hand from distance, right? He's kind of like a right-handed Manny Pacquiao in a sense, right? That right hand, simply put, pays the bills. That right hand has given him the title. He has length, he knows how to use it, he keeps you outside. He then starts dropping big right hands on you. After he softens you up, he can then jump deeper in the pocket and do a lot of other things. Now, this is that rare fight, though, where, in my opinion, the guy with more talent, Joseph Parker, would be at the disadvantage. Because I feel Parker does more things better than Deontay Wilder. But neither of these guys, neither of them, knows how to fight inside, in my opinion. Right? Parker has the better jab. Parker, to me, throws the better left hand. Right? Parker might be the better athlete, quite frankly. Just looks athletic in the ring. But I get the feeling Parker is a guy who's learning how to do a lot of things. I get the feeling Wilder knows the things he does well. So, just first impression, short video today, because I want to hear from you, right? Thoughts on fights evolve over time. But my initial impression, if this fight is announced, and I understand, the fight isn't signed, it's just one fighter wanting to fight the other, right? In a fight I think would be huge. I just feel that Wilder's ring coverage and his right hand, and what I view as Joseph Parker's inability to fight inside, which would have given him an advantage on Wilder, right? In other words, Parker's going to be outside where Wilder wants him, right? Wilder has the ring coverage. Andy Ruiz, Parker's last opponent, did not have, right? Parker also has been winning photo finish fights. I personally thought he lost to Carlos Takam. I personally thought he lost to Andy Ruiz. To me, that would place him at a disadvantage against Wilder, who would almost be certain to land one of his long right hands, right? I don't think Parker is the person who would go hunting Wilder. I believe Wilder is a person who would go hunting Parker. I would pick Wilder in that fight. Let me add that one of the intriguing things with the heavyweight division right now, in my opinion, is that many of the champs with belts, Parker, Wilder, Joshua, I believe they're flawed, right? They have holes in their game, bigger holes than champs have historically. In other words, you know, you look at a Larry Holmes, a Lennox Lewis, a Vitaly Klitschko. These guys were champs with very few holes in their game, right? They were seasoned fighters when they put on the belt. The guys today have holes in their game. And so I personally believe, right, that that's going to make for dramatic, fascinating fights. Let's shift gears. There's a great article on Forbes, right, a financial site, today, January the 10th, where they're talking about the biggest money makers in boxing, right, the biggest money makers. They also have their own pound-for-pound list. Let me just offer a different opinion, and I understand that the opinion's going to be very different, right? I want you to go to the Forbes site. You're going to see a host of names. I don't want to name the fighters because people will then think that I'm dissing the fighters. But understand, in boxing, unless you have a prime Floyd Mayweather against a prime Manny Pacquiao, or someone like a prime Oscar De La Hoya, right? Guys who are cash cows in the lighter weights. Unless you have a figure like that, and they only come around once every few years, right? A guy who you understand, when you put him on pay-per-view, is going to get at least 1 million views, right? At least 1 million views. Unless you have a guy like that, there's the heavyweight division, and then there's everyone else, right? Understand, heavyweights are not just bigger. They have bigger checks, right? You look at the top pay-per-view fights, you're going to see a bevy of fights with a host of heavyweights, right? Mike Tyson, cash cow at heavyweight. Lennox Lewis, Mike Tyson fight, big time cash cow fight, right? Several other heavyweights. Vladimir Klitschko at times, when he fights in Germany, gets ratings that are the equivalent of something like more than 12% of the country watching his fight. I'm not talking about 12% of TV viewers. I'm talking about 12% of the country watching his fight, right? Even the somewhat box office smaller weight guys, Miguel Cotto, for example, can't match that level of popularity. So I believe the Forbes piece is way off, right? In my opinion, you know, while some of these lighter guys, Sergey Kovalev, who they list, Andre Ward, who they list, right? Golovkin, who they list. While some of these lighter weight guys can generate numbers depending on an opponent, right? And I would question the numbers that most of these lighter guys generate, right? Boxing doesn't have as much money as you think. Just understand that Anthony Joshua, who's a relatively green heavyweight champion, right? A guy whose biggest opponent so far was who? You fill in your blank. Dominique Brazil, right? Charles Martin, Kevin Johnson. You know, a guy who's relatively untested in the ring, in my opinion, probably has more box office power than even Saul Alvarez, who is a box office heavyweight by boxing standards. Let me also say, too, let's not get too sucked into people's last fights. As I was reading the Forbes piece, I had to start laughing out loud at how low they put Manny Pacquiao. Understand, life's unfair. Some fighters have charisma for whatever reason, right? You could look at Manny Pacquiao against, let's say, Tim Bradley, the first fight, right? And you could say to yourself, wow, you know, Pacquiao didn't look his best and stuff like that. You could look at Pacquiao in his fights against Juan Manuel Marquez. The bottom line is, for whatever reason, right? Whatever reason, Manny Pacquiao is one of the most compelling people to watch in the sport of boxing, right? Manny Pacquiao in his sleep can get better pay-per-view numbers than some of the hottest names in the sport, right? If I had to bet, and this is a gambling channel, on who's going to pull more pay-per-view buys for an upcoming fight. Terrence Crawford, who's a great fighter, in his prime, or Manny Pacquiao, who's 38 years old. My money would be on Manny Pacquiao, right? Pacquiao's the guy who has the fan base. Pacquiao is the legacy maker, right? So I'm looking at the piece on Forbes, and I understand they're really talking about how much money a fighter made in his last fight and stuff like that. But the idea that the sport of boxing outside of the heavyweight division has 3 or 4 guys with more box office appeal than Manny Pacquiao is, quite frankly, ridiculous, right? That's not the sport that I monitor. That's not the sport that I talk about here online, right? Just understand, we could discuss whether or not Manny Pacquiao belongs on the pound-for-pound list. But let's stop kidding ourselves in terms of talking about Manny Pacquiao's box office power. I understand there are a group of you who I'm sure are ready to leave comments in the comment section here saying, hey, Manny's pay-per-view don't match Floyd's pay-per-views, right? Understand, you could be world-class but not be Usain Bolt, right? You could be a world-class sprinter, one of the biggest money makers in track and field, and not be the king, right? The fact that Manny isn't Floyd doesn't mean that Manny doesn't generate more pay-per-view buys than Terrence Crawford, right? I guarantee you, if Manny were to have fought Victor Postal when Postal was unbeaten, they would have generated more pay-per-view buys than Terrence Crawford did when he fought Victor Postal. So I encourage people to read the Forbes piece. But after you do, get back to reality, right? Heavyweights are bigger and have the bigger paychecks, right? They get the bigger box office. No one here is saying Anthony Joshua is Ali, right? No one's saying Deontay Wilder is Ali. But Deontay Wilder was to get over $4 million. $4 million to fight Alexander Povetkin, right? $4 million, right? Anthony Joshua, I'm just telling you, is going to make much more than that against Vladimir Klitschko. And if he beats Klitschko, I'm not sure if anyone in the sport, as long as Joshua is unbeaten, is going to be able to match his paychecks, right? In sum, there are a lot of great fighters out there, right? Terrence Crawford, he's a great fighter. But let's not confuse skill level with box office pull. So in conclusion, I like Wilder over Parker, even though I consider Parker to be the fighter with the greater upside, right? Wilder would be catching Parker at the right point in his career, right? I'd feel differently about that fight if it were to take place 2 years from now, right? But right now, I think Wilder beats Parker, right? I also think heavyweights get the biggest checks. That's how I see it. Let me hear from you. I hope you leave your comments in the comment section to this video. Thanks for stopping by.